My guest on this episode is a 7-time Emmy winner as a sports journalist. A 3-sport star in high school, he played college football and later had a brief stint in minor league baseball. Today, he teaches media and production at the college level while also hosting a nationally syndicated podcast and running youth sports camps. He's also prominently featured in a recent Netflix documentary. By any measure, that's a full life. Now, go back and listen to that again with this addendum. He was born without legs. Dave Stevens is my guest on Media Credentials.
I demand satisfaction.
My name is Whit Watson, and this is Media Credentials. I'm a sports announcer who's worked a lot of places. This podcast will peel back the layers of sports media and show you how the sausage gets made. Through interviews with industry pros and my own experience, you'll understand why you're seeing what you're seeing and who's responsible for it. Your media credentials have been approved. Dave Stevens has done more in his life on no legs than most people have done on two. He is the only legless athlete to have played both NCAA football and minor league baseball. He's been featured on programs like The Today Show, Good Morning America, and The View, and he's been profiled by just about every magazine and newspaper in the country. He's currently prominently featured in the Netflix documentary Saint of Second Chances, the story of legendary baseball executive Mike Veeck, son of baseball showman Bill Veeck, and the man who gave Dave his shot at minor league baseball with the St. Paul Saints in Minnesota. Dave spent 20 years working for ESPN in Bristol, manning the assignment desk and editing coverage and content. He covered Super Bowls, World Series, Final Fours, and every other big event, earning those 7 Emmys along the way. In the years since leaving ESPN, Dave has become a media renaissance man. He reports for the Disability Channel and co-hosts a nationally syndicated podcast. He teaches media production to disabled college students in Connecticut and runs sports camps for disabled kids. He's a father of 3 and, unsurprisingly, highly sought after as a motivational speaker. I've known Dave since the late 90s. We worked together at ESPN. When I posted something on Facebook earlier this year about starting a podcast about sports media, Dave was one of the first people to volunteer as a guest. Lucky me, because this is a hell of a story. Dave, I hate to do this to you, but the first question I ask is going to be the hardest question for you to answer and the longest answer. What do you do? What's your job description?
Wow, I feel like I'm Chris Berman with a 2-minute drill. That's a great question. I mean, being born without legs, I had these goals when I was a kid. I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to play pro baseball, and I kind of accomplished all that. And now I guess my job is to kind of teach the world to see that if a guy without legs can do what I did in broadcasting and in sports and what I currently do at the college, what's their excuse? Like, why aren't other people going out there to shoot for the goals like you, Whit, to get at ESPN, to get to the ultimate in our profession? So now I guess, I'm kind of this philanthropist slash motivational speaker slash podcast host slash you name it. I just was at Runway of Dreams modeling in New York. So I get to wear all kinds of, since I don't have legs, I get to wear all kinds of hats,
I will get to the Netflix documentary, Saint of Second Chances. I know you're very excited about it. You've been doing a lot of publicity for it in the last couple of days as we record this. But let's go back to the start. As you mentioned, a man born without legs, a congenital amputee. When did you start getting out into the world of sports? You played a lot of sports growing up. How old were you when you, and I assume your parents, figured out a way that you could take part?
Yeah, I was adopted. So, strike one, born without legs, strike two, put up for adoption. But my parents, a World War II vet and a housewife, just instilled in me that I wasn't handicapped and that was my normal. And so around 5th or 6th grade, I got tired of watching my friends at recess and everybody out there playing touch football or softball. And I just said, all right, I'm going to work at it. So my buddy and I in his backyard with the first, with a Nerf football and a tennis ball, throwing a glove to my glove, I just started figuring out how to adapt and play sports. And so then the important thing, as you move up that food chain is to not get picked last for teams and to go from being, the last pick next to the, short, portly kid. I started moving my way up to where I actually got to start being the captain. And then moving into high school, those challenges of playing high school football and wrestling and baseball where no one had ever done it before. So I always looked at myself as like Reggie Jackson because I knew everybody was staring at me and I always had to come through under pressure. And so I was able to be very successful in sports despite not having legs. And it led to a TV appearance on That's Incredible, which led to a TV job in Minnesota, which led to me getting at ESPN. Like, I mean, everything I owe is to overcoming the odds and being able to, just showcase that, look, we all have gifts. And I just figured out how I could use mine in a different way.
The only legless player in history to have played NCAA football at Augsburg University in Minnesota and have played minor league baseball with the St. Paul Saints. And that brings us to the Netflix documentary that just dropped, Saint of Second Chances. And you're featured prominently. How did they approach you about it? Give me the backstory there about playing minor league baseball.
Well, Mike Veck was the owner of the Saints. His dad was Bill Veck, who had a little person came up to bat, and then they were banned from baseball. And growing up as a kid, I said, look, I want to overcome that. I want to be able to be 3'2" and play professional baseball. And ironically, I end up in Minnesota where Mike Veck just bought the Saints, and I kept talking to him and said, give me a chance. He's given Leon Durham a chance. He's giving all these people. And he said, come on out. So I just started at ESPN in 96, and I went back for a month of minor league baseball, and lo and behold, here's Darryl Strawberry and Jack Morris. But the thing that you'll see in the movie, which again, I had heard about, but I'd never seen until you see the movie, is Darryl Strawberry says he owes his comeback to me and that relationship, him seeing a guy without legs going out there trying to make this team and playing baseball. And it helped him to fall in love again with baseball. And our friendship to this day, we're still friends now that he's a minister and he's cleaned up and done okay. And I'm, real proud of this segment of a big movie, and it was before the internet. If I'd have been doing it now, they'd probably have The Rock playing me with his legs CGI'd off and, big home run to win the World Series or something crazy. But it was a great time for me. And now I don't have to tell people my story because you can see it in this movie, and it was produced by MLB. And now I'm getting people reaching out to me going, can you speak? Will you appear on this? Can you talk? And it really is, it's nice that I'm, able to show the disabled world that, yeah, there are people like Jim Abbott and Shaquem Griffin who played with one hand and myself that, like, if we can do it, we hope there's another one out there.
Speaking of Netflix, so they had a documentary recently called Swamp Kings about the Urban Meyer University of Florida Gators teams, the two-time national champions. And I show up in episode 4 from when I worked in Florida as a broadcaster on a cable network down here. I got more messages and phone calls and texts about that cameo appearance in one episode of that documentary. I've been on TV for 20 years, Dave, and more people saw that seemingly than anything I did on Golf Channel. I have to think with this Saint of Second Chances coming out on Netflix, you alluded to new opportunities, but people you haven't heard from in a long time must be just coming out of the
Yeah, I mean, I've had ex-girlfriends and all kinds of other people that say I was just sitting there and this was recommended, and then your ugly face popped up. And but the nice thing about this movie is it's a love story. It's not a baseball movie where I don't want to sit there and watch the history. It's a love story of Mike Veck and his battles of creating Disco Demolition Night and overcoming that, and then his daughter who ended up having retinitis pigmentosa and her challenges that went along with it that the world didn't know about. So it's just you take me out of it and it's still a good story. You put me in it, it's even better. But no, I'm joking. But it's it's important that people see this because there's so many parts to it of people that have overcome. Isla Borders, the first female pitcher in professional baseball. So there's a lot of great things that I'm really proud of, and it's not like I went around at ESPN and bragged about it. Most people didn't know about it. And, and I appreciate the time that you and I had there together and to get these relationships where now it's like, yeah, we're both on IMDb and in a movie, and it's kind of cool.
I think your IMDb page is slightly more populated than mine. You probably have a few more credits than I do. Before we get to ESPN, let's go back to playing football in college. You talked about having an interest in sports media and being a broadcaster, but you had the opportunity to play college football. Was the football experience, and then you had tryouts with the
Mhm.
Cowboys as well as the Twins and the Reds in Major League Baseball. So were you pursuing a career as a professional athlete, or were these just extensions of some of the attention that you had received?
It was just luckily the TV station I was working at while I was going to college would allow me to work my schedule around because I really did want to play, and I played 3 years. And it was a great experience, but there was a lot of animosity on my team. Um, we weren't that good, obviously, in those days. There was a legendary coach named John Gallardi who is still the all-time winningest coach in football, and he would love to beat us up 70 to nothing or whatever. But the experience wasn't super great because there were stories being done on me, and my teammates were kind of like, well, why are they doing stories on him? Why aren't they doing stories on us? And I was said, well, cut your legs off and maybe they'll come, or maybe win a few games and they might come. It was always weird. And then I realized as I look back and now thinking of all the acne on their backs and all the steroids and stuff like that, it's just that's what those kind of things cause for you. So I was lucky that the Cowboys invited me. I had two opportunities. The Packers invited me to come to camp. I could have gone for a week or so and possibly even maybe played in a game. The Cowboys offered me a 1-day tryout. I went down there. Obviously, my speeds and my long jump wasn't up to their standards. And I'm like, well, why did you waste my time? I don't know if it was they were looking for the publicity. So I kind of regret, but they were America's team at the time. And, I have no regrets because football led me to go to Ireland and play, and New Zealand and Australia on a U.S. All-Star team. So it was great. But I realized that I was going to make my mark as a journalist, either in front of the camera or as a producer, or all the things I got to do locally that helped me to get to ESPN.
So let's get to the broadcasting path. You talked about the local station in Minnesota. How did you get to Bristol, Connecticut?
I used to do a lot of interviews with Twins and Vikings and stuff, and I had a really good rapport with Kirby Puckett and Herbeck and those guys. They knew I played and they had respect. I was on my crutches and I'd be going up and down those long stairs of the Metrodome to get to them. So I had really good rapport of getting post game and pregame, and ESPN wanted it, and suddenly they'd pay $250 a pop, and then suddenly they're like, "You're really good. Would you like to come work here?" And I thought, well, it's not on air, but it's ESPN, and most people at those times it's ESPN, so you just drop everything and go. Little do you realize everything that you get with that baggage in Bristol. But so I came here in '95, packed up everything, my dog and two cats, and came up here and worked on the assignment desk and made my mark to become a manager, and then run parts of our bureau and things like that. And then in the wave of 2015, 500 of my coworker friends and I all got laid off. So it was a great 20-year run. I got 7 Emmys out of it. I got to work with people like you and Kenny Mayne, and now I have a podcast of my own where I just had Craig Kilborn on the other day, and I've had, Neil Everett and all of our friends to come on, Linda Cohn, and just talk, and I have a great time. So I'm still enjoying life, even at my advanced age. Trying to show these kids, and now that I'm at Quinnipiac, also trying to teach kids that somebody with a disability can be in the media and have a successful career.
And I will come back to the podcast and the your position as a professional in residence at Quinnipiac in Connecticut, which I think is a fantastic story. One of the things that this podcast does is platform people who work in sports media whose jobs may not be terribly well known, even to a knowledgeable fan. And you just use the term assignment desk. So tell people what an assignment desk manager
Well,
does.
back in the old days, I think it's completely changed from what it was. But in the old days, it was like, we need you to go get this. We need you to get sound from the local affiliates. Call up Whit Watson and get some sound from the team that they're about to play. Or there was controversy today and we need that. And you barter and trade, even if you're not an ABC. Also deal with all the PR teams in those days, set up credentials, deal directly with the PR as, hey, we need Derek Jeter for 10 minutes, or we need to talk to Joe Torre, or, all those things. And then logistically setting up all of the lines and cables and satellite trucks. And, it was literally everything that went on Sports Center ran through me and my group to get it on the air. Nowadays, you can do everything with a cell phone and plug it in. And, so it's really changed. But in those days, we were very, very important to the success of ESPN and to the people in the field.
Things may have changed now, Dave, but in terms of being on the assignment desk, I recall you guys seemingly worked 24 hours a day. I mean, that was a fairly labor intensive job, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Wit. It was, basically we were a jack of all trades. We were responsible for the people in the field to set up credentials, dealing with the Yankees or the Dodgers or whatever. Hey, I need Derek Jeter, I need Joe Torre, getting that stuff set up, and then dealing with, all of the intricacies of a stadium, getting lines put in, cabling set up for cameras live on the field, and then more importantly, to get content that we didn't have, because in those days there wasn't able to feed over the internet or be able to do this. So we had to do satellite feeds to get, like, hey, Whit, we need sound from the team you're going to play this week, or we need this hole in one from a special, high school match or something. We had to physically get that fed via satellite, book those windows, get it brought in, and turn that content. Where now you can email a clip, you can go live with a cell phone. But at the time, yeah, we were part of everything that went on Sports Center and through Sports Center, and I was really proud of that. And you did need to be there 16 hours a day sometimes. One of my greatest moments was a tragic day, the Boston bombing, where I kind of took over in the newsroom and dealt with ABC and all of the stations that had better footage that wouldn't ordinarily give it out. We were working together to get it out to all the news bureaus and everything. And so I really loved my time there. Unfortunately, in 2015, like 500 other folks, I got laid off, but I'm enjoying life now more than I did for those times that I was at ESPN. But it was a great time, and I remember we'd have conversations in the newsroom, and we would have fun, not only lead-ins, but talking about sports and music, and like it was a sports bar without the alcohol, and it was so fun. And I don't like what it's turned into now, and I'm just lucky, and I'm sure you can say the same thing. We were there at a good time when it was still, something that people revered.
It was definitely appointment television, and it's definitely changed. And I'm with you. I just feel very grateful that I was able to be included for the period of time that I was. After you left, even though they were circumstances that you didn't choose, you did, because you had left that off-air position at ESPN, have the opportunity to do a lot more stuff on camera. And every photo I see of you, you're holding a microphone or interviewing somebody. So how much did you enjoy that opportunity?
I love it. And I've had so much fun working for the Disability Channel and Ability Media at Quinnipiac University, and just kind of doing my own thing. And because I had such a good reputation in the field, the NFL credentials me at the Super Bowl, and I can bring students for that experience, and I can go to MLB games. I was at the World Series last year. If teams in this area are going to be in it, like Philadelphia, there's a good chance I'll be back. So I pinch myself when I'm here with Gronk or Aaron Rodgers or Otani or all the people that I've had the pleasure of meeting. That, again, when you're in Bristol, you're sitting behind a desk on a phone, and plus the fact that I'm not bad at what I do. People like to talk to me. I love to have conversations, and it's more than just a wins and loss thing for me. I try to do my homework and throw in something. So if I'm sitting there with the Diamondbacks manager, and we're talking about, hey, by the way, your dad invented hee haw, and we start talking about Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson being at his birthday parties, suddenly Troy Lavella opens up, and you're getting a whole different side of a manager that people don't get because they don't do their homework. So I've really grown, and my only regret is I wasn't doing this 20 years ago. But as long as I can do this, and again, they're not used to seeing a guy without legs with his butt on the field, or climbing over shoulder pads to get to somebody in a locker room, or being on a baseball field in a wheelchair. I mean, people, that's just not the norm, and I'm trying to break that stereotype.
On that topic, the Ability Media initiative that you mentioned at Quinnipiac in Connecticut, teaching media and production to disabled students to create job opportunities and careers. How did that come about?
Well, the dean at the time, Chris Roush, thought this would be kind of a neat program, and they tracked me down through an alumni at ESPN who used to work at ESPN, and he's been gone a long time, but he's a cameraman named Bruce Taylor, and he tracked me down. And Quinnipiac said they want to bring you in and start this program. So I said, okay, well, let's get the kids with disabilities. And again, some people don't like to tell the world they have a disability, even if it's unseen. So I came in, we put out some feelers, got a lot of students involved, and we put out content about the disabled world, whether it's a good story or a bad story, or just covering, a Runway of Dreams event in New York a couple of weeks ago, or me going to the All Wheels Up conference in Washington, D.C. For airline accessibility on planes, meeting with Senator Tammy Duckworth. So whenever my life brings in the world of disability, I'm able to bring in Ability Media to do things where we're shooting a video for Cigna, and we get to talk to the governor, and he gets to see what our program is. And we've had students that are now working in television in New York and writing for newspapers and things like that, because we're the biggest minority in the world, but we have the smallest voice. And a lot of times it was regular actors portraying somebody with a disability rather than finding an actor with a disability to play those roles. It was great to have a movie a couple of years ago with an all deaf cast win Movie of the Year. So we're making progress, but I don't know how many are in the wings. And so that's why I'm trying to make sure that at least these kids get an opportunity. If they're, if you have a disability and you don't want to be seen on camera with it, we have to figure out, okay, should I sit you down for all your interviews, or do we need to have, if your foot is 8 inches shorter than the other, do we keep a box for you to stand up? We want people to succeed, and you can't teach confidence. You have to have them experience it. And like I said, I've been stared at all my life for not having legs. And my motto was, if you're going to stare at me, I might as well give you a show. Not everybody's comfortable. Not everybody's comfortable with that. So, some want behind the scenes, some want to do, on camera. And I try to work with them to give them those experiences that can take them to other levels.
I'm a little bit envious because you had the chance after ESPN being at Quinnipiac to spend more time with Barry Sachs. And, I talked to Christy Sataro, her married name, Christy Hugic, and we talked a lot about Barry, and I dedicated the episode to him. He was one of the most influential people I ever worked with. I wish everybody who listens to this had the chance to know him. But along with Barry, just some thoughts on people that were big influences on you.
Well, first off, Barry and he was the first class I ever did. He had me working with one of his classes with him to learn and everything. And he just cared about people. And he didn't have to continue after he was let go at ESPN, but he continued to seek out jobs for other people and put in information out there, and really one of the most loving and giving persons. So if you people that listen to Wit don't know, go Google and see some of the tributes that were done on him by other organizations, not just ESPN. But most of my influencers were my high school coaches, my wrestling coach, and my baseball coach, my baseball coach just turned 89, and my wrestling coach just turned 75. And they became my mother and father because my parents were elderly and they couldn't come to my games, and I got to hang out at their houses on weekends. And coaches can't do that nowadays, but my coaches were my biggest mentors and believed in me and instilled in me. And years later, I found out, if you could imagine parents coming up to those coaches and saying, how could a guy without legs beat out my son? And those coaches having to say, well, your son sucks, and a guy without legs is a better athlete than your son. So, and that happened to them in football and in baseball and wrestling, because I was a starter, and it wasn't one of those, we feel sorry for you, let's hand him the ball for one play. Yes, we were a small school, but I was on varsity and 3 years in baseball and wrestling and football and these things. And so it's been mentors along the way at little points. Bob Lee and Chris Berman were instrumental in helping me and getting to know, to your point, all of the behind the scenes relationships I had with the PR people, where at one moment I could call in favors, or you wanted to see them, you wanted to say hi and shake their hands. And now it's so adversarial because most requests for media are not for good things. They're always to cover a trade or a DUI or something controversial. So that relationship has really changed. And especially with now they don't trust anybody because of social media, because you can tweet things and take unflattering video, or so they're very protective now. Where in our day, and I'm sure you experienced it too, where you could literally walk into the office and ask for the coach and it'd be okay. Now you got to email and double check and triple check, and it's crazy how much it's changed.
Very true. And speaking of Google, for those listening, Google Dave Stevens and go look at some of the football highlights and the baseball highlights. This was not a charity case. This guy could play. I've seen plenty of video on Dave over the years. And on that topic, so you've put on sports camps for disabled kids across the country. Do you have success stories? Have you found some kids who have a disability that's obvious or not obvious, who has attended one of your camps or has gotten in touch with you somehow, who's then gone on to play high school varsity or play in college? Has there been some positive ripple effect?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked out with a couple of kids, and I think one of the stories, I won't give his last name, but I think you may have seen a young. He's a teenager now who has no legs, and he's playing basketball. His name's Josiah,
Okay.
and he's out there doing his thing. There's Zion Clark, who's now the fastest man on two arms. I think we just saw him on America's Got Talent, and I've kind of been mentoring him and talking to him, and I'm hoping that there will be another Dave Stevens or Jim Abbott. That we hope that there is going to be somebody that's overcome something to get to that level, and I'm praying that these kids can see by example and can see even at 57, if I'm out there throwing a baseball or rolling around on the ground with these kids, that, hey, look at that old guy. He cares. And it's more the parents, I think, that I want to impact, that let those parents realize that their kids are going to fail, and to not coddle them and to not baby them, and to let them go out there and, figuratively stumble and fail, because we, with the disability, we already have the odds stacked against us, and our losses add up quite a bit more than the victories, but they're much sweeter if we set a goal and we try to achieve that goal. And the parents, they want to protect them. And we now live in a world where everybody gets a participation trophy, and we don't keep score at little league games. And it's like, well, life is about wins and losses. And I think the younger you teach that, the more that people can become tolerant and acceptable and take losses with class and work harder to make sure you get those wins.
Or even just as far as learning from the loss. I don't necessarily think you have to hammer home you've got to win to a kid, but when the kid loses, help him or her understand, okay, what have you learned from this? How are you going to do things differently next time? Do you care that you lost? Does it bother you? Did you practice? Did you put in the work? Did you
Yeah.
do what needed to be done in order to be successful? I used to tell my son, who is still a recreational golfer, he's 23, when he played JV in high school, if he hadn't been practicing, if he had not been putting in the time, and I went to go watch him play a match, if he got mad, if he threw a club, I'd pull him aside and say, you don't work hard enough to get mad. You haven't practiced hard enough to get mad. If you're out there 5 days in a row prior to the match and you play poorly, okay, get mad, throw a club. But if you're not putting in the work, this game doesn't owe you anything. And
Right.
I wonder if that kind of, you and I are sort of old men yelling at kids to get off the lawn, but I wonder if that lesson has sort of been lost with
No,
youth sports
no.
today.
It's the same way as that we live in a 7-second TikTok mentality world, and we just swipe away everything that we don't want to deal with. And these kids can't have conversations. How are they going to have job interviews when they can't have communication and they don't know because were coddled, or teachers just pass them in high school because they don't want to deal with it, or all the things that we now see in society. So I think we don't need those Texas type coaches screaming at kids on, Saturday Night Lights at the Pee Wee level, but
No, of course not.
I do think it gives kids structure if you screw up at practice and you can run a lap. And nowadays, if you screw up at practice and the parent says, you made my kid run a lap, well, that's discipline. Then send your kid to daycare. We need to work better. And it shows that we aren't getting to where we want to be as a nation because of our job work ethic, and everybody thinking, these kids in college I deal with think they need to work 8 to 1 and get an hour break in between. So it's like, you want to help educate the world that yes, you need to work hard, you need to set goals, because that's the best way to succeed in life.
On the podcast, which we're going to talk about in a minute, who have been your favorite guests? Who are the people that have either surprised you or someone that you thought, yeah, that person was nothing like what I thought he or she was going to be?
I would say Craig Kilborn the other day. I mean, we just had such a great time, and he gave me a compliment because I had every possible video ready when he talked about either the Late Show or the Daily Show or ESPN, and I was just dropping hits. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're really good at this!" And he just opened up about why he left late night TV. And again, I know we see him as a standoffish kind of guy, but it was genuinely one of my favorite shows. And another one was Lydia Cornell, who used to be on Too Close for Comfort. And we had a great show, talked about what sexism was like in the 70s and all the things that she had to go through. And then I pulled out an old clip that I found online of the Battle of the Network Stars where she couldn't do an inflatable kayak and she laughed. And so I try to do unique, fun things for all of the guests and the Village people. That was great to have them on just recently. I mean, like I said, we have had a who's who of, Burt Blyleven and Tommy John, and we've had musicians and singers and actors and things. And I'm just this little legless dude in his living room doing this show. I mean, so we know that with a little hard work, you can continue to do fun things, and I'm having a blast.
The phrase runway of dreams came up earlier, an initiative for adaptive clothing. So explain to me what that means.
Yeah, they reached out to me and wanted to give me an award, and I'm like, well, what is this? What's adaptive clothing? And it turns out there's a huge market for clothing that is made specifically for people with severe disabilities. If you can't button a shirt, they've got shirts that have magnets or Velcro. If you have a catheter need or a colostomy bag, they've got shorts that open up in the back if you're in your wheelchair, or shirts that open up in your back in the back if you want to transfer. And so I got invited to this thing. They dressed me in a Tommy Hilfiger suit, gave me an award, and I was just so impressed. So now I'm on the board of their charity, and they utilize me to be an influencer for a lot of adaptive brands. I got to be on The View and model on The View with Whoopi Goldberg and everybody. And it's another amazing part of my life, of the worlds that come together. And who would have thought this sports guy would now be getting dressed and being out there to showcase clothing for people with disabilities. And the Runway of Dreams initiative is to also showcase kids with disabilities that could either model and act, and they're the ones that are out there on most of the stages. So it's been such a great, rewarding experience for me. And I'm really trying to get the word out there that fashion should be okay for people with disabilities. We want to look at it, and again, that helps with your confidence. If you look good and you look like everybody else, you're going to fit in better.
Where do we find you online these days? You've got podcasts, you've got your motivational speaker, but in terms of regular content, where do we find you?
You can just throw out Dave Stevens Speaks for pretty much everything. And then the podcast is called Geary, Stein, and Stevens. I got two other folks in Minnesota that jump on occasionally, and we get great guests. As I mentioned, I'm just so blessed to have contact still with a guy like you, or Kenny Mayne, or all the people that I come across in life. And we had the Village people on. We had Ralph Malph on recently. We have a lot of fun, and it's not just sports. It's called the Geary, Stein, and Stevens Show. It's now on Roku, so I am on TV technically. And it's on Roku and Your Home TV. And I'm proud that we had 1.1 million views last month. So, I'm getting there. I'm 57, and with so many awesome things happening, I'm really excited about the future, being able to speak more and talking to kids and letting them know, again, if I can come from a one-room shack in a little ripped up town to get to where I've gotten, that everybody should be able to have hope.
In just a few seconds, we'll have some closing thoughts on this episode, so stay tuned. If you're enjoying it so far, please consider subscribing or sharing, and leave a review. Let me know what you'd like to hear in the future on Media Credentials. Some Google assignments for the listener after hearing Dave's stories. In August of 1951, the St. Louis Browns sent a 3-foot, 7-inch tall pinch hitter to the plate in a game against the Detroit Tigers. His name was Eddie Goodell. He was signed to a contract with the Browns by team owner Bill Veeck. Bill's son, Mike Veeck, inherited his father's flair for baseball showmanship. Mike Veeck was the promotions director for the Chicago White Sox in 1979 when the team scheduled the ill-fated Disco Demolition Night. You can look it up, but the short version, it didn't go well. Dave also mentions Shaquem Griffin. Griffin was born with amniotic band syndrome, which forced the amputation of his left hand when he was 4 years old. Nevertheless, he became a two-sport star at Lakewood High School in St. Petersburg, Florida, an all-state linebacker and the Pinellas County Athlete of the Year in track and field. Shaquem and his twin brother Shaquille played college football together at UCF, and both were drafted into the NFL in 2018. Shaquem retired after 4 seasons and now works with the NFL in a program that assists former players in transitioning to life after football. Your final Google assignment, search Dave Stevens football. You'll see his tryout with the Cowboys and highlights from his playing days in college. You'll also find scenes from his youth sports camps and examples of his skill as a motivational speaker. DaveStevensSpeaks.com is his personal website. I'd like to thank Dave for staying connected all these years and volunteering himself as a guest, and for reminding us that nothing is impossible. Thanks again for listening to Media Credentials. For examples of my work, including video and audio clips, a blog, and my contact page, check out whitwatson.com.